I think I'll just play a little bit first, if you don't mind, and then I'll kind of fill you in after we play a little bit. Real short version. You can play this for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, something like that. So sort of a really short demonstration, I guess. So what we're doing, I'll show you a little bit. What we're playing is an instrument called the Mbira Dzavadzimu, which is a specific kind of instrument called an Mbira, which is a type, and then the Dzavadzimu is the particular kind. So you can sort of see it. It's hard to see what we're playing, but it's metal keys, and you play them with your thumbs and your fingers. So it's sort of a plucked instrument that's somewhat different than most other instruments. It's not a string, it's not a percussion, it's its own sort of special category. The only other instrument I know that comes close to the same thing is a music box. Like when you wind up a little music box and it's got the little bumps inside with the keys. That's sort of the only other instrument I know that makes sound like this. So it's sort of somewhat unique. I wanted to give you a real fast background. Basically, it's something found in Africa, and there's lots of types of instruments like this found all over Africa. But this particular one comes from the Shona people found in the southern part of Africa, mostly in Zimbabwe, but also in some of the surrounding areas. It's very, very old. Written record goes back to about the 1500s, but oral records and archaeological evidence goes back at least 1,000, if not longer. So it's quite old, and it's been developed over a very, very long time. Today, the function, it's a very versatile instrument, very versatile music. You can find it just pure entertainment. They use it for work songs. They use it for pop music. There's been integration with like electric instruments and pop music in Zimbabwe for the last 30, 40 years. Ceremonies, rain-making ceremonies, local religious ceremonies. The highest functioning one is something called a Bira, and you can hear the name is somewhat similar. And for the Bira ceremony, it's an all-night event, something that starts about dark, and everybody gets together, they drink a little beer, they talk, they eat, and then the musicians will play and play and play, and they usually play until sunrise the next day. And during the course of the night, people go into trance, and then they're able to communicate with ancestors, ask some questions about why the crops aren't growing, or who should I marry, or whatever advice that they want to get from their ancestors. So when you have those ceremonies, you have to play really old songs that the ancestors would recognize and want to come down and listen to. So it's a really special function. Then performance practice, the typical ensemble setup is at least 3 people, so we're sort of shy one. As far as I know, Serene and I are the only 2 Mbira players in Singapore, so we can't do all 3. But typically you need at least 2. It's sort of a communal music. You can play it solo, but it's actually really designed to be played by multiple people. And then the 3rd player you would need is somebody who plays these instruments called a hosho, and they're shakers, and they act as timekeepers basically for the ensemble. But we'll sort of skip those, but I thought you might want to see them. Typically, the audience participation would be quite different as well. We wouldn't be all spread out and so forth, and you guys would all be singing and dancing and clapping, and there's a lot of interaction between audience and musician. In fact, there's really not much separation, except that some people are playing Mbiras and some people are dancing and singing and so forth. Then I wanted to talk very briefly about the tuning, because a lot of people are interested. There's not a standardized tuning like a piano or a clarinet or something like that, but there are relative tunings. So the instruments are tuned according to sort of itself, I guess. So the same way that you have like a scale that's the same, whether it's C major or D major or E major, they're all major, the instruments are the same. So the 2 tunings we have today are tunings called Gandanga and Nyamaropa. And the one we already played was the Gandanga tuning, the minor one. So the scale, if you're interested. So it's almost like our minor scale. It's called a Phrygian scale for any of you that know. And then the one we'll play next is Nyamaropa tuning, which has a bit more major sound. So it's a mixolydian. It's got a kind of a flat 7 there, so it's a little bit different. But so far there's no standardized tuning. Usually when they make a new one, they just have an old one that they like, and they make the new one in tune with the old one. So different makers make different instruments of different quality and different tunings, and you sort of find your own makers. This is my favorite maker, so I've got a couple of his instruments. Then, maybe before, I wanted to at least show you this for the resonance. If you don't have microphones and whatnot, you actually would put the instrument inside one of these, so when you're out where there's no power and so forth, the instrument goes inside and you lock it in there, and that'll amplify the sound quite a bit, but I didn't see any reason to do that today. We've got microphones and whatnot. It's a lot louder. But anyway, that's the typical one, and that's even an adaptation because it's a fiberglass instrument. The old ones would be made of calabash, like gourd or something like that. Then, now the kind of the fun part, what keeps me really interested is the music itself, and if you want to know a little bit about it, it's from an oral tradition, meaning there's no written notation system, so everything's taught from teacher to student, teacher to student. And of course, with foreigners and Westerners coming to learn, we've come up with our own notation systems and so forth, but traditionally not. The cycles, the songs themselves are actually really, really short. If you put it in Western musical terms, a composition typically is only 4 measures long in 12/8 time, and then you just repeat, repeat, repeat. And as I'd already said, you can play the same thing for 20 minutes or 1 hour. I have a CD at home that's 1 song, 1 hour. That's it. Just 4 bars, over and over and over and over. A lot of people wonder about the buzzing sound. When we got here for the sound check, the guys were freaking out. They're like, what is that sound? You know, it's an aesthetic quality, and you find it in a lot of African instruments. They'll actually attach bottle caps or other bits of metal to the instruments to create this sort of buzzing effect. You find it on African xylophones, you find it on drums, you find it on the Mbira. In Western music, we have a snare drum. That's the one you would think of. It's got the sort of buzzing sound underneath, and we like it there. Yeah, that's what that is. Then what's really fun is you've got these multiple lines that are occurring sort of simultaneously, and I want to talk about that a little bit. And then the interlocking parts that create this sort of dense texture is why you need 2 people. So there's sort of a part A and a part B, and you need a second person to complete the musical structure. So that's why you need at least 2 people to really do it justice. But it's really complicated because inside one part, you've got lots of other parts. Actually, let me show you this. This is what's fun. Okay. So the next piece we're going to do, I'm going to give you a little background. This one's called Nimamum Sasa, and I'll play the part that she's going to be playing later. I'll play the whole composition for you one time just so you can see how short it is. That's it. That's the whole song, okay? But then you just keep repeating, and then there's all these variation techniques that you do to make it more interesting, there's singing and so forth. But really, even just within that, there's a lot going on. It's actually quite interesting. So I'll play and I'll bring out some of the lines. I'm not going to change any notes, I'm just going to put a little accent in places so you'll focus on certain things that are happening. Still here? So that's going on. Then there's this other tenor line, this other higher part. Okay, then. Can you hear it? So anyway, all those things, I haven't done anything except just repeat, and there's all these different things that are already happening, so you don't need to do a whole lot. It's already in there, and that's just the first 3 or 4. With that, like I said, I'm not changing any notes, I'm just bringing out a couple of the parts that are already there. So it gets quite complicated quite quickly. It seems sort of simple, but it's not. Then, if you want to go beyond that, if you actually want to start changing notes and so forth, I really don't want to get too far into the variation technique, but there's all these sort of ways in which you find variations, and then when you learn them, you can apply them to lots and lots of compositions. So since it's an oral tradition, you want to memorize a way to improvise and then apply it across the board to most of your compositions, so you don't have to memorize lots and lots and lots of different things. You can sort of figure out ways in which to do it. So that's how you keep the songs interesting, is through all these different variation techniques and so forth. And then sort of what keeps me interested in this. I've been playing, I guess, for about 14 years now, and I'm still nowhere near done, and I'm still learning. This idea of sort of simplistic complexity, I'm still trying to figure out a good word for this, or complex simplicity. It's at the same time, it's both. It's very, very dense and very complex, but at the same time, actually not. It's sort of simple in other ways as well. So I'm fascinated by how a music or a structure can do that, can be sort of simple and complex at exactly the same time in different ways. And again, since there's all these different lines happening, when we play, what I find absolutely fascinating is that I don't know what you're listening to. So we can all be listening to the same music, but what you hear, what you've chosen to focus on, can be completely different than the person sitting next to you. So you're listening to the same music, but whatever's happening in your head, I don't know unless you were to sing it for me or something, and then I might be able to tell. So we could all be listening to the same thing, but quite different things at the same time. The other thing is the music seems to draw people to it. I used to teach this in San Diego, and I always taught it outdoors because you could, and that's how I got my students for the next year, because inevitably somebody would just walk by and they just stop and they're hooked. That's it. And then they want to know more about it, and then next semester there they are, they're in the class. So there's something about this that seems to draw some people to it, just inexplicably. You either kind of love it or whatever, but it seems to get quite a few people. And then, of course, the last thing, I guess, is that you can take that 4-bar song and you can spend the rest of your life, literally, I'm still playing the first song I learned 14 years ago, and you can spend the rest of your days figuring out new stuff that's in that song. You can continue to develop it over and, new stuff pops out of the instrument all the time while I'm playing. It's astounding. So I guess that's what keeps me driving, is it's never done, ever. I'll never finish a song, basically. And so just for the last maybe minute or two, I'd give you one more song. We'll put this one together and I'll show you how it sounds.